Hello, you're tuning into UniTunes, the show where we seek to showcase the sounds of Australia's freshest emerging artists. I'm Fynn, and today I'm chatting to ERNIE STOPIC from Sydney. Thanks so much for joining us. How are you going?
I'm good. How are you? I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Really excited to have you on the show. But before we get into it, I just want to acknowledge and pay our respect to the traditional custodians in the land we're on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. So, ERNIE is a 19-year-old guitarist who independently writes, records, and produces experimental progressive rock from his bedroom studio. And excitingly, you have your debut LP coming out at midnight tonight at the time of recording. So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
All right. So, this album, it's basically the culmination of all of the music I've made up to this point. It's completely independently made. Everything from the recording of the actual instruments to the writing to the production. I've done it all myself with just a little bit of help on certain tiny little things from other friends. But yeah, stylistically, it's a bit all over the place, but the way I like to think of it mainly is like progressive rock, sort of experimental stuff. So yeah, ultimately there's 3 different styles on the album. We've got almost like metal hardcore stuff at some points. We've got the instrumental prog rock stuff that's like Steve Vai style at other points. And then there are a few tracks which are quite calmed down acoustic style stuff.
Sick. And it's quite interesting because your work is quite experimental and you do a bit of, different sounds. But I feel like, at one stage, the mark of a good album was its cohesion and how much everything fit together. I feel like that's very much less and less the case. For you, how much does a track need to tie together and how do you achieve that sort of cohesion despite the sounds maybe being a little bit all over the place like you described?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, when I was first thinking up making the album, that was my big issue. It's like, I've got all of these songs, I could chuck them together, but they're all over the place. Like, I remember way back years ago when I was first thinking I could make an album, like the idea was to make it like about the contrast of it. But yeah, the way I've sort of got away with it is that to a certain extent, no matter what I do when I'm making my music, it all sounds like me. It's all clearly what I've made to a certain extent. So you can tell it's all cohesive in that sense. And the other way I've made it sort of work is through the track listing itself. So the track listing, if you listen to the album from start to finish, it sort of goes on a journey that like it doesn't ever feel like you're jumping violently from one thing to another unless that's my aim, of course. So like the album starts off with the instrumental experimental stuff, then goes to a rocky song, then it calms down and starts to slowly sort of build up from that acoustic stuff back into the experimental stuff, into the hardcore stuff, and then ends on a really, really soft track. So yeah, it's like a balance of finding like where the contrast doesn't work and where it does work.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And clearly a lot of thought's been put into the record and how it works. It's interesting, that, you're trying to take your listener on a journey that feels right. So how much, storytelling are you trying to achieve with this record?
Ooh, I don't know if it's so much like storytelling. So basically, another important thing to say about the album is half of the tracks are instrumental, half of them have lyrics. So there's a definite split there, and they're chucked one after the other. There's no difference in that. So thematically, lyrically, there's not much cohesion between what the different tracks are saying, but the mood of the tracks is where it sort of comes together. So I have actually done one of my favorite things on any album and have a lot of the tracks blend into each other. So you have one track finished before you even realize it has, and it's blended into the next song and stuff. So it's not necessarily about a story of what's happening, but it's just like a flow between the tracks, which feels natural, sort of thing.
I have to agree. I love it whenever an album does that and the tracks do blend together. I think some artists do it brilliantly. And it almost makes you wonder, why don't more artists do it?
Yeah.
But then again, I guess you're sacrificing the singular song and like its capacity to do its own thing to belong as part of this greater whole body of work. And when you looked at making this album, how much did you look at making individual songs one at a time? Or how much did you look at it as just, this is the body of work and it all just exists to each other?
Realistically, because this album has been like so spread out over years of work for me, each song was developed on its own. It was more just like once I'd have a track and I was looking at them all together, I was going, hang on, I could change the ending of this one so it flows into this one. For example, like one of the tracks, Burning Memories, it like purposefully does this like little modulation at the end where it like the final chord of the song is D minor or whatever, but I've like put a C major 7 over the top of that and then like lifted that up in the mix so that in the next track it goes straight in with a C major and it feels natural, sort of thing.
I guess on that note, on the technical side, your music is brilliant. And you've, I think most of your songs have a very, very, just insane guitar solo. So your guitar skills, you've obviously built them up over the years and you're obviously quite talented. So I did also want to ask about that journey of guitar becoming such a key part of your sound.
Yeah. I mean, ironically, out of all of the instruments I've learned, guitar is like the one which is completely self-taught. I've never had a teacher for guitar. So when I was younger, I had piano lessons when I was very young. In primary school, I learned to play the baritone horn in the school band and stuff. And my father is a guitarist. He plays rock music or whatever. And that's what I grew up with. And so over time, I saw what he was doing and I decided that that's exactly what I wanted to do too. So I picked up the guitar. I like figured it out for myself. So I feel like that's what contributes to my understanding of guitar, is that everything I know about guitar is like organically like understood. There's no like someone's told me this and I've taken a while to understand it. It's like I've sat down with the guitar and I've figured it out as I go. So I've been playing guitar for probably about a decade now. And yeah, I mean, it all just comes down to early on, I was learning the songs that I love to play, and that was building up my technical skills. And then it eventually got to a point where I was improvising and figuring stuff out for myself. And that all sort of eventually led to where I am now, where I write and play whatever I want.
That was really interesting. And I think, I think when you're learning an instrument on your own and teaching yourself, there's this level of blissful ignorance where it almost helps not to have the rigid structures of the theory or, being classically trained. And how much of that is still the case where you kind of prefer not to know, I suppose, the right way to go about something because there's more freedom in just working it out on your own?
Yeah, no, 100%. So one thing that's kind of funny is that no matter how proficient a guitarist I am currently studying to become a music teacher, but I cannot for the life of me teach anyone how to play guitar. I cannot do it because the way I learnt is so disconnected from the way guitar is taught generally. So like every time I've like tried to show someone anything on guitar, it's like everything's so deep seated in the back of my mind, makes so much sense to me because I learned it organically that I can't explain it, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I feel like I've gone beyond trying to learn like, oh, here's the music theory scale that I should be playing, and more like, this is my instrument. What can I do with my instrument?
That's really interesting way of looking at it, almost like a tool, I suppose. On this notion, it sounds like a lot of this you're doing on your own. You like guitar on your own. You've made this album mostly on your own. But you're no stranger to collaborations. If you look through your discography, there's a few collabs and a few features. So How's that looked in the past, having other artists jump on your tracks, being part of the process versus maybe your more recent stuff where you're trying to do it all more on your own?
Yeah. So the two songs which are already out, the singles that are collabs, we've got The Father with Nick Volandis and My Precious Crime with Maya M. Both of them are tracks which I wrote and then decided that the best thing for the track was to have them as the vocalists. So they're both friends I went to high school with, and I like had music classes with them and everything. And so, yeah, I mean, I've never been too much of a singer. I have sung on some of my tracks, but I've always wanted to work with others. The like independence of this album isn't like I'm doing this on my own because that's all I know. It's I'm doing this on my own because that's the only way I know how to get anything done. So I love working with people. There's about half a dozen different people who've recorded different things here and there on the album, things that I can't do, like really good drums, or I even got my younger brother to play flute, a couple vocal things.
Cool.
But yeah, I love working with people. I have my band, which I'm playing with tomorrow, which is playing all these songs, and it's just amazing to see these songs come to life. There's always just a little spark which an individual brings to your songs, which makes them slightly better, slightly different. I have my other band, Zygosis, which I've been gigging with for the past year or so, and that's always fun to play with. Great to collaboratively songwrite and stuff. So yeah, I love working in an environment, and this album's not me trying to get away from that. This is just what I have done on my own.
Yeah, right. So speaking of, you have your album launch gig tomorrow at Mosh Pit Bar. How are you feeling? You know, the record comes out at midnight and then you play it in a real world setting tomorrow. How are we preparing? What's going on in your head?
It's terrifying. I'm not going to lie about that at all. Like, I've been somewhat non-functional for the past week because it's just been like, oh, Sunday's the big day. I'm just waiting for Sunday. Later today, after we finish recording this podcast, I'm going off and doing big final rehearsal for the jam, for the gig, and looking forward to that. I'm playing with some amazing musicians for this gig, so I'm super excited. We got two great bands opening before us, so I'm worried, I'm nervous for the whole thing, but I know deep down that no matter what happens, it's going to be amazing. So yeah, it's like, because I've done everything independently, all of the organizing for everything from the album and the gig, it's like been a lot weighing on my mind, but I also know that come Sunday, all of that's getting lifted off and it's done. And I've done this. I've released an album and done a gig.
There you go, which is, you know, two huge accomplishments. Any other musician will be able to tell you, organizing a gig, hosting it, all the logistics, finances behind it is a nightmare. It takes so much time and effort and thought. Yep. So doing that on top of the album, I imagine it'll be a nice feeling when it's done. So, you know, translating all these songs into a live setting, you've said that, you know, there's those little tweaks that just make it a little bit different. You know, what's that process looks like, and how much have you been able to draw from your experience in the band Psychosis in influencing how your own live band's going to sound?
Yeah. Okay. So one interesting thing I should say about this live band is that we're going completely instrumental. This is a band built around the guitar solos rather than the vocals. So
interesting.
A lot of the tracks on the album which have vocals, we're not playing live and filling their space with a couple different covers. But yeah, when it comes to like how I've understood playing in this setting from like Zygosis, one of the tracks we are playing is a song we also played in Zygosis, The Father. So, but we're playing it differently, obviously, because we're cutting out the vocals. But there's a level of difference in what we're doing between those two bands, because Zygosis was everyone's giving their own little bit in the songwriting process and coming out with a full product. And this time it's I've got everything here for you. Please learn it. We'll see what we can make of it.
Yeah.
So it's been a step up in the sense of I've gone from being like the probably most like organized person in Zygosis who's like getting everything done to the only person organizing anything in this band, which is scary and annoying at times. But like, yeah, I've found myself just having to put a lot of faith in my band members to get the stuff done. And I mean, they have. It's amazing to see. So yeah, it's scarier when you're the big boss of the band, but I don't know. It's like even more amazing when you see the product, because it's like, this is the song I wrote in my bedroom however long ago, and now I've got 5 people playing it alongside me.
Yeah, I can imagine that's very rewarding. Like one thing that I have, heard, whether it's, a DJ, just seeing people dance to the music they've chosen, or, an artist, hearing people sing back a song that they've written in their bedroom. There's something so rewarding about other people engaging with something that's come from you. I have to say, it's quite interesting the way you talk about how this gig's not going to have any vocals and it's going to be centered around the electric guitar solo. Like that is the centerpiece, the front man, so to speak. So I guess for you, do you see in vocals not necessarily needing to be the centerpiece of a live music performance? Is it just another instrument that can be interchanged?
Yeah, I mean, like, we see vocals as like the centerpiece of a music performance from like a popular music and a rock music standpoint. But like this style of music I'm playing is like, imagine if you took rock music and you combined it with classical or jazz. Yeah. So in the same way that you have a symphony playing with a horn doing the main solo, that's what I like to think of this as, is that the guitar is the solo part. And in a way, it is completely substituting what the vocals are doing. Like, because we're doing it in a rock music setting, it's like I'm standing where a vocalist would be standing, but just playing the guitar sort of thing. And yeah, it's interesting. Like, I have been to a couple gigs of artists who are like that. My 2 main influences for what I do are Steve Vai and Pliny. And I got to see both of them in the last year or so. And yeah, they're artists who just play no vocals, electric guitar is the main thing. And it's not like that's detracting from the live music setting. As long as the like energy of the music is still there, that's what the audience is after.
Yeah, awesome. That's so cool. Well, the gig's tomorrow, the album's tonight. If you were to pitch them, elevator pitch, what do people expect from these 2 projects?
Okay, we'll start with the album.
Yeah.
I was like laying in bed last night trying to think of like the 3 words which best describe the album. Yep. The 3 moods which it has mainly, which is hard because it's all over the place. But I think the best 3 I could come up with were melancholic, existential, and a little bit angry at different points. So I think if you listen through to the album, you'll see where each of those comes from. Like my dad was saying to me the other day, one of the songs was giving like quite a feeling of loneliness. And yeah, I just find it kind of funny that that's the vibe the album comes off, and that's the vibe that all the music I make gives, because that's not my vibe necessarily, but it's the vibe that comes out of my music. But I don't know, that's fun. And with the gig, yeah, no vocals, guitar in its place, but you're not going to miss it.
Awesome. I love that. That's a great pitch. It's all there, but you're not going to miss it. I love it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And, so interesting how like, the music you make doesn't necessarily have to represent you, I suppose. And that's really interesting. And, I can't wait to hear the whole thing when it's out. Midnight tonight, the time of recording. So, exciting times ahead. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we let you go, anyone listening, they want to hear more of your music, want to find out where your upcoming gigs are, where can they find you?
All right. So for like all the information you'll find on my Instagram at STOPIC, which is BERNESTOPIC. And then if you want to find my music, my album is out tonight at time of recording on hopefully all streaming platforms. So Spotify, whatever. You can buy it on Bandcamp as a CD, handmade CDs of the album that you can buy if you're really into it.
That's sick.
Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. Well, check out the new album, go to the show. It's sure to be fantastic, and you won't miss the vocals as we've been told. So, Ernie, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. I hope you have a great day. Good luck at your rehearsal after this.
Thank you.
And take care.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.